right, welcome to notes 23-2, and these are 30, 60, 90 special right triangles. All right, 30, 60, 90 special right triangles. So again, we have two pairs of special right triangles. We have 30, 60, 90s, and we also have 45, 45, 90 triangles. So the last lesson was on 45, 45, 90s, and I just want you to remember that the ratio of the leg to the hypotenuse was 1 to 1 to 1 root 2. Okay, so just a quick recap. So for example, if you have a 45, 45, 90 triangle, and let's say that they've given you that the hypotenuse is 6 square root 2, and they ask you to find the length of one of the legs, x, you're going to draw your reference triangle, which is a 1, 1, root 2, and you're going to create a proportion. So you can go 6 is to root 2, 6 root 2, sorry, is to root 2 as, oh, you can't really see the yellow, so I'll do that again. 6 root 2 is to root 2 as x is to 1, and then solve this however you'd like. Generally we cross multiply, but I always check for simplification, like those radical 2's will cancel out, and so I get 6 is equal to x. All right, now let's take a look at what happens with 30, 60, 90 triangles. So in a 30, 60, 90 triangle, we're going to start off with an equilateral triangle. So this is an equilateral triangle, so that means that all sides are congruent, and that means that all angles are congruent. In fact, since there's 180 degrees in a triangle, if they're all sharing that 180, all three angles equally, that tells you that each angle is 60 degrees. So this is a 60, and this is a 60, and the top one's also a 60. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drop an altitude. I'll remind you that an altitude makes a 90 degree to the base. It's perpendicular to the base. And so what happens is that now we've divided this equilateral triangle into two congruent triangles. And so if there's 180 degrees in this triangle right here, then I would take 180, subtract off 90, that gives me 90. I'll subtract off this 60 degree angle, and that gives me 30 degrees. That means that this is a 30 degree angle. Also, in any isosceles triangle, which equilateral triangles are isosceles, the altitude from the vertex angle bisects the angle. So it cuts this into two congruent angles. All right, so this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. It's a 30, 60, 90. I'm going to draw it off to the side. I'm going to give this side of this triangle any length I want. I'm going to give it a side length of 2. So this is going to be 2. And again, this is my 60 degree, and this is my 30 degree. Now what happens is the altitude also cuts the base into two congruent pieces. And so if we cut this into two congruent pieces, then each side is 1, right? 1 and 1. And then finally, we're looking for this unknown side x. So we're going to use the Pythagorean theorem to find that. Remember that the hypotenuse is across from the right angle. So we've got x squared plus 1 squared equals 2 squared. And that means x squared plus 1 equals 4. And then we're going to solve for x. We get x squared equals 3. And then we would square root both sides. And we get x equals the square root of 3. And so now, forevermore, this is our special 30, 60, 90 triangle that we must draw. So our reference triangle for a 30, 60, 90 degree triangle is, we've got on the short leg, this is my short leg across from the 30, the shortest leg is a 1, right? On the hypotenuse, which is right here, this is a 2, so that's across from my 90 degree angle. Whoops. And on this leg is a square root 3, so the middle one is square root 3. All right, so you need to know this like the back of your hand. All right, let's go ahead and do a couple of examples. So for example, let's just say that we had an equilateral triangle with a side length of 4. and they want to know what is the length of the altitude of the equilateral triangle. And so to figure that out, right, I'm going to go ahead and put in my 60-degree angle. I'll draw in my altitude. And what I know is that this is a 30, 60, 90 triangle. So I'll draw my reference triangle. My reference triangle for 30, 60, 90 is 1 on the short leg. Remember, short leg. √3 on the long leg. And 2 on the hypotenuse. And then I'll create a proportion. So I have 4 is to, remember I'm looking for this side, the altitude. So 4 is to x, as 2 is to square root 3. Whoops, 2 is to square root 3. This time, since my x is in the denominator, I am going to cross multiply. So I cross multiply, I get 2x equals 4 square root 3. And then I'll divide both sides by 2. And I get x equals 2 square root 3. All right, we're going to go to the check your understanding. So let's take a look. We're on number 10, and this is on page 333. So the check your understanding. It says in a 30, 60, 90, the length of the shorter leg is 6 inches. So we're going to draw that. So here's my 30, 60, 90 triangle, right? And it says the shorter leg is 6, the shorter leg. That's going to be right here. And it says, what is the length of the longer leg? So the longer leg is right here. We're going to call that x. It also wants to know the length of the hypotenuse. I'll call that one y. So this one will be x and that one will be y. And so what I'll do is I'll draw my reference triangle for this triangle, which is 1, 2, and √3 on the longer leg. Remember, the hypotenuse is always 2, the short leg is always a 1. There's my 60 and my 30. And so I have x is to 6, as square root 3 is to 1. And since x is in the numerator, I'll just multiply both sides by 6. And I get x equals 6 square root 3. And then to do this, to find y, I would do the same thing. This time I would say y is to 6. Y is to 6 as 2 is to 1. 2 is to 1. Since y is in the numerator, I would just multiply both sides by 6. And I get y equals 12. All right, you should try the next one on your own. I'm going to go ahead and draw it. So you should pause and try it. But I'm going to go ahead and draw it out. And I have 30, 60, 90, and the hypotenuse is 10. And I'm going to tell you that you should set up your proportion, right? Call one of these x and the other one y. And then you draw your reference triangle. And this is 1, 2, and √3. I always draw my reference triangle the same direction as the triangle that I'm working with. And so you're going to get here that x is 5 and that y is 5 square root 3. And if you don't, then you've done something wrong and you should ask me questions tomorrow in class. All right, that was all of notes 23-1. Please remind yourself the difference between a 30, 60, 90 and a 45, 45, 90 and when to use which one. Have a great night.